And I also, and this is an older game, I talked about playing Prey a bunch last week. I beat it. I beat Prey, 2017.
Did you beat it before?
And I did not.
Okay.
So before I only got like maybe 2-3 hours in, and now I went through the whole like 25-hour thing. It's stellar. It's absolutely stellar. It's my favorite immersive sim, which is a term, you fucking freaks. Um, I only like. It's easier to talk about the things I didn't like because it's so stellar. Like the level design is A+, and the skill set and interaction with the game world is absolutely excellent. The only real issues I have is that enemies respawn constantly, and they're on a, I don't know what to call it. I'm sure you've encountered this, where like you're walking around a game world and enemies don't respawn, and no matter how long you take, they won't respawn until you fucking do something.
You walk past a checkpoint and trigger it.
You walk past a checkpoint, you complete a quest or whatever, and then they respawn. In Prey, it genuinely feels like every world state or quest completion respawns some enemy somewhere, which makes it so that like you'll like exhaustively clear out a zone only to return 25 minutes later and there's dudes walking around again, and you're like, fuck. God damn it.
You can never sprint with confidence when you're backtracking.
And on top of that, the actual enemies that you're dealing with are not that interesting. They're called the Typhon, and the mimics, which I've talked about at length, are fantastic as chairs and bottles, but all the other enemies are, I'm a shadow tentacle phantom man, or I'm a shadow tentacle floating thing, or I'm a shadow box that holds turrets, and they're all just kind of like visually uninteresting.
So as a connoisseur of the survival horror genre, and as someone who I would consider a Resident Evil expert, how do you feel about like the best way to clear zones and still have threats present? Do you like the idea of, I cleared all the zombos, I know the ones that are down are still down, but when I trigger this puzzle, the liquor shows up?
Okay, so this is like a, oh my god, this is actually a really complicated question.
But what's the most fun version of this?
What's the
do
most
you want to
fun
run
version?
back through the police station with confidence, or do you want to be on your toes?
The most fun version ever is Resident Evil 1's. And I literally just looked over and saw somebody in the chat say it perfectly, which is never respawn the same enemies. Okay. So in Resident Evil 1, you do the mansion, and the mansion is 85-90% populated by zombies.
Not remake, by the way.
Yeah, I'm talking about RE1, all the way back in the day.
Okay.
You deal with the zombies, maybe some dogs, right? You go to the guardhouse, and the guardhouse is its own separate section that has zombies, but it also has the plant, and it has some sharks, whatever. You come back to the house, and now most zombies are gone. There's a couple left, but they've been replaced by hunters. And more importantly, the trip to the guardhouse is like a definitive, like, act moving forward. You completely left the mansion. You've been gone in the mansion for a while. And now you've come back maybe an hour or two later, and the enemy layout is different. So going through the mansion as that portion of the game as Act 1, when you've cleared it, you've cleared it, and you've cleared it. And coming back to it, no, suddenly there's something new. And if you didn't get the enemies before, the new ones will have replaced them.
Okay.
Right? So when you played Remake 2, there's a part where you get to go to the sewers and go back to the police station. And in that case, zombies have been shuffled, and also liquors have been put into new locations, and that's nice. In Prey, the issue is the game's space is very large, and you're dealing with mimic three types of phantoms, but they're visually very similar. So Mimic, Phantom, Weaver, and then the box floating ones, which are Technopath and Telepath. So you're really only dealing with 4 enemy types total, right? There's some variation in between them, but it's 4. And so you'll clear out the lobby, and then you'll head to Psychotronics, and then you'll head to the Guts, and then you'll head to the Arboretum, and you'll get back to the lobby, and there are more phantoms. And then you'll leave the lobby to go back to the Arboretum to hit crew quarters and get back to the lobby, and now there's 2 more phantoms and a Weaver. And that lobby repopulated like 10 times.
Okay.
In my game. And
so
the issue is that, like, in a Resident Evil game, there's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, right? They're very definitive. In Prey, you're doing Neuromod Division, Lobby, Psychotronics, Hardware Labs, Guts, Arboretum, Crew Quarters, Power Plant, Power Supply, Shuttle Bay, Life Support, Power Plant, Water Treatment. Like, there are 15 disparate zones, and you can go to them in any order, which is great, but it means that there is not a really obvious shift point to repopulate the old areas.
Okay. So it's open-ended, and that creates part of that issue. Because what you're describing in RE1 is, yes, that is an optimal design decision where you design backtracking as progress. You make the path back in through where you went actually is new progress, there's new challenges, new enemies, and things like that. I know that, like, I mean, it was ultimately fine, but, like, in Batman, when you come back to the main hub room of whatever zone you're in, there's gonna be a new group of enemies going like, oh, this time around, Joker says do this, you know?
And that's fine, because the difference is that in your immersive sim or your horror game, what you're dealing with is that every single enemy encounter costs. It costs ammunition, it costs health, it costs time, it costs something. So, like, Hardware Labs is a really good example. You go to Hardware Labs as, like, the second area in the game, and then you can go back there to enter into a hidden room, and then you can go back there a third time to open the airlock, and then go around the station. You can go back a fourth time to do a satellite. So I went back there maybe 4 or 5 times. Every single time I went back into Hardware Labs, there were new enemies. Every single time I went back into Hardware Labs, I had something new to fight. Comparatively, for some reason, I went back into Psychotronics a couple times and only found new enemies there once. And I ran into this issue where it's like, I have dealt with this enemy, Phantom, specifically. It's the most common enemy type, in this spot, like 6 times. And what am I doing? I'm stunning it with a spell and then shotgunning it once and it's dead. And the issue, I think, is that in Prey, you're scrounging constantly. You're picking up banana peels and apples and ammo and every little bits and piece to manufacture for crafting or ammunition. And when I beat the game with like over 100 shotgun rounds, hundreds of pistol rounds, like over 1,000 stun gun rounds, over 1,000 beam rounds, and I ended up manufacturing 222 neuromods, which are the level up currency. Just manufactured them by the hundreds, and was drowning in resources. And if those guys were not respawning, I would have been double, triple drowning in those resources. So they made a game that, like, incentivizes you to scrounge with the knowledge that most players aren't going to scrounge that hard, and they need to put enemies in the world to use up that ammunition or use up those resources.
Reason to go scrounging, right?
But the math is off. So, like, if you ask me, like, what I would prefer, I would prefer there to be no respawning enemies, and 1/10 of all available materials. So that, like, the most interesting part of a survival horror game is the math equation in a hallway where you go, do I want to use 2 shotgun rounds to put this down so that I never have to worry about this hallway again?
Mm-hmm.
And in Prey, you have all the shotgun rounds in the world, and it's not a question. You're going to put it down, but it's also probably going to come back later.
There's respawns. How many times are you going to have to run around this corner? Right.
Right. And it's frustrating. Like, it's this fantastic game with all these incredible systems touching each other and melding in really interesting ways and all these cool little interactions that I'm like, I wish you could just tone it down. Like, all of it. I wish I could make the enemies all 5 times as strong and put 2 in every zone. Right?
Yeah,
like,
okay.
just
keep the experience novel while with the challenge. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? And increasing the difficulty doesn't look like it would fix it. It just means that you have to scrounge even harder. Like, I cannot possibly see a situation in which I would actually have to start sneaking around and avoiding confrontation instead of dealing with it, because, like, the math doesn't really work out. It says a lot that at the end of the game, I had so many materials left over that I bought all the level ups for sprint speed and stamina and jump height just so that I could run by encounters.
Yeah. I think honestly, you can take a look at the way players behave in examples like Souls games, where it doesn't matter what the difficulty of the enemy is. If it's the same enemy in the same place doing the same thing, I'm going to find a way around it when I'm doing my 9th or 10th run around this corner.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that whole game becomes memorize the whole thing and then just completely have no encounter here whatsoever, even if it is a hard thing to fight, you know?
It also has an issue where once you learn to manufacture the level up neuromods, sneaking around enemies is a terrible idea anyway, because you use enemy parts to build more level ups.
Okay.
So there's literally never any incentive. By contrast, I'm going to be playing Mooncrash on Wednesday, which is the Prey DLC. That's a roguelike. And it's a roguelike that has the zapping system in it. So it is the same type of first-person perspective scrounging game. But the thing is that they'll give you like characters with specific skill sets that it'll be like, hey, take this guy and get out with the escape pod. And then round 2 is pick a new character and escape a different way because the prisoner escaped on the escape pod. And the wrench that the prisoner picked up outside the starting location is now gone because
so
they
share
picked
the
it
same
up
seed.
And left with it. And the enemies that guy killed are dead.
You share the same seed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And you have to do it with 5 characters in a row. So I'm very interested in checking that out because it seems like by changing the format just a little bit, it basically solves my problem because now there's no respawning enemies because there's too many enemies to deal with.
But the 5th person out is going to have a really hard time.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. That's smart.
Yeah, Prey is an absolutely excellent game. It's easily my favorite of Arcane stuff. They did Dishonored. They did the Dishonored games, and they're putting out Deathloop. And it even has a hidden morality system. Like, I've complained about Dishonored's chaos system for hours because I think giving you an assassin game where they tell you not to use 8 out of 10 tools because they're lethal is a stupid fucking idea. And Prey, it constantly gives you nice little situations that would tickle your moral thing, but like characters will talk shit at you, but like nothing happens. There's a really good one where you find out that there's a shuttle that's going to Earth, and I'm reading an email about a shuttle is going to Earth, and the security are freaking out because they don't know if mimics were on board before it left. and if it gets to Earth, it's all over. You know, it's a pretty typical like situation. And they're talking about how they don't know if they should blow the shuttle up because, you know, is that wrong or what have you. And then I'm reading the email, and I finished reading the email, and then I look over at the computer next to it, and there's a countdown, or there's a real countdown that's at like 3 minutes and 2 seconds counting down of ship's arrival to Seattle. And then there's a big fat button that says blow it up or not. I blew that fucker up. And nobody talked to me on the radio to tell me that I did a good thing or a bad thing. I just said, yeah, fuck him. And like it does play into like what I would term as the game's post ending, but it's literally a report card. It's not like you've been locked out of ending A or B. It's literally like characters talking to you like, well, you did that and that was pretty fucked up. Okay. It's I love its little hidden morality system. And looking at, so they're making Deathloop now, which is
Are they making Deathloop?
What's that?
They're making Deathloop.
They're making Deathloop, which is
Deathloop. What is
time
Deathloop?
loop. It's a time loop.
And what console is it available on?
Every PlayStation.
Huh. Perhaps we should walk through the mechanics again and introduce gamers to Deathloop. Have you heard about Deathloop, gamers? What is it about this game that just keeps fucking... I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it just
They're pushing so hard.
Holy fuck, they won't stop.
They are pushing so
Every
hard
single
on
event.
Deathloop.
But have you seen Deathloop, though? Have you seen it?
It's really wild. But the only thing that I want to talk about Deathloop is that Deathloop is way more like Dishonored, and they have fully given up on like non-lethal morality shenanigans.
Okay.
Where it's like every single video of that game is fucking tear ass through it and kill everybody you need to kill to do it. I think one of the Dishonored designers was like had a hard on for like morality through play or something like that, which sounds great on design, but like just sucks shit to play. Did you ever play Deus Ex 1, Woolie? Like the original?
Yeah.
You remember your brother?
For a little bit, though. A little bit.
Oh, no. Okay. So your terrorists take over the Statue of Liberty, and your brother's like, you should try and do this non-lethally, right? And if you kill a bunch of the terrorists, he admonishes you, and he's like, listen, man, you shouldn't have done that. That was bad to do. And like, that's literally the only time anyone tells you like what to do ever in that game for morality, and then you find out that the reason why he told you not to is because he is secretly part of that terrorist organization and didn't want you killing his buddies.
Okay.
And it's like, oh, the only part of the game reaching down its big finger and go no, no, no was not the game. It was a character's ulterior motive.
It was plot.
So okay, great.
Clean.
As I've played more and more games of like the 7th gen, I'm like, man, there was like an insane hard-on for morality systems in that era.
Or choose or choose between stealth and guns blazing.
Yeah, it was like the most omnipresent thing.
It's like, okay, how fun is stealth? Am I crawling at the speed of fucking molasses through this entire map? Will they see me on sound? Will they see me on sight? Will it be light-based? Is it a worse game to play if I'm playing it stealthy?
It reminds me of Infamous. You remember Infamous 1, Lightning Man? And the evil playthrough was more fun. But I look at that and I'm like, did you guys just make a game where you got to split half of the powers across a certain way so that people would play the game twice and thus be less likely to sell it as a used game? Like that's what it says to me. Like the
replay value is replay value.
Yeah, but it always felt so much like we want to put just enough replay value that we're doubling or tripling the playtime so that they don't sell it.
I mean, but you could ascribe that motivation to anything that adds multiple playthroughs.
I totally could. You're right.